Welcome to the channel Codes Up. In this video, we will learn how to create a employee management system using Spring Boot and Thymeleaf. So if you don't know about the Thymeleaf, then don't worry. We will discuss what is Thymeleaf first, and then we will see how we can use Thymeleaf with Spring Boot. And by the end of this video tutorial, you will be able to answer how to use Thymeleaf with Spring Boot and how to create an application using Thymeleaf and Spring Boot. So let's start the tutorial with the basic introduction of Thymeleaf. So Thymeleaf is a server-side Java-based template engine for both web and standalone environments, and it is capable of processing HTML, XML, JavaScript, CSS, and even plain text as well. So we can say that it is more powerful than JPS and responsible for dynamic content rendering on UI. And this engine allows a parallel work of the backend and front-end developers on the same view. Also, it can directly access the Java object and Spring Beans and bind them with the UI. So if you have question how it access the Java object and bind it with the UI, then don't worry, we will learn that in the upcoming part of this video. And also Thymeleaf is mostly used with Spring MVC when we create any web application. So yeah, let's start with an example to understand how Thymeleaf works with the Spring framework. So basically to understand how Thymeleaf work with the Spring framework or with Spring Boot, let's set up a project first. So go to your IDE. I am using IntelliJ IDEA here, but you can use Eclipse as well. So yeah, click here on new project and then Spring Initializer, and then give it name Employee Management System, and here com.employee.management.system, and here package name is so long, so we will make it simple and short. Employee management com.management.employee, or simply we keep it as com.employee. And then from here you can use the JDK. So we have a JDK 11 on our system, so that's why we are choosing JDK 11 here. And since we have a JDK 11 installed, so we are choosing Java 11, but you can choose according to the environment that you have, according to the JDK version that you have installed on your system. Now next is the packaging, so keep it as default for now. So then click on next, and from here we have to choose dependencies. So let's understand first what all dependencies we need, then we choose from here. So yeah, so here as we know that we are going to create a employee management system, so and performing the CRUD operation on employee data. So basically employee management system application have four features mainly: adding a new employee to the application, reading the existing data of the application, updating the existing employee, and deleting the existing employee if we want to delete. So for building this, we have to add certain dependencies which are listed here. So yeah, so first dependencies that we need is Spring Web. So basically Spring Web dependencies is used for building web application, including RESTful application, and basically it has the embedded Tomcat in it as well. So let's add Spring Web. Then after adding Spring Web, next dependency that we need is Spring Data JPA. Basically, this dependency is used to persist data in SQL stores with Java Persistent API using Spring Data and Hibernate. So we need Spring Data JPA as well. So we will add Spring Data JPA as well. And after adding Spring Data JPA, we need Spring Boot Dev Tools. Basically, this one is not mandatory. Basically, it provides a fast application restart, live reload, and configuration for enhanced development experience. So you can add it, or if you want to skip this one, then you can skip this. But we are going to add it, Spring Boot Dev Tool. So after adding this, we need MySQL driver. So we will add it as well so that we can perform database operations successfully. So we will add it as well, MySQL driver. And then we need Thymeleaf, because here we are using Thymeleaf in the UI side. So we will add the Thymeleaf as well. So basically, if here is a small description, that is server-side Java template engine for both web and standalone environments, and allows HTML to be correctly displayed in browser and as static prototypes. So let's add Thymeleaf as well. So we will add. So now you can see here we have all the dependencies that we require for creating our employee management system project. So let's click on create, and after clicking on create, it will download all the dependencies and sub dependencies for your project. Here you can see downloading share indexes for Maven library and Spring Boot 2.7.3. so basically Spring Boot version that we are using in this project is 2.7.3, and it is downloading all the dependencies. Here you can see that resolving Maven dependencies. So meanwhile it is downloading all the dependencies, let's discuss what we want to achieve next. So this part is complete, that is project setup. Now let's create a classes that we need for creating employee management system. So first one is the database configuration. So database configuration, for that we have to add common database related properties in the application.properties file, and that are basically what your database name is, and what is the database password, and what is the database username, and how you want to fetch the details from the database. So let's add the database configuration in the application.properties file. So go to your application.properties file, that is under the folder source main resources. So in the application.properties file we need to add spring.jpa dot properties dot hibernate dot dialect. So this is the first property that we are adding, and value for this is actually this one. So let's add other properties as well. So let's add in this way so that it not give us any issue. So make sure whatever database name you are giving here, you have that database created on your MySQL, as we are using MySQL as a database here. So let's open MySQL and create this database. So we'll be opening MySQL and create this database. Create database student management. Okay, it is giving us error in our SQL syntax, so let's try to. Okay, so make sure you don't have any hyphen in your database name, so give name as, sorry, it is not student management, it is employee management system. So database created as employee management system, so we need to replace this here, employee management system, and then we need to mention other two properties that is related to the logging level of SQL. So let's add those as well. And we will add one more property that is related to the DDL, and that is this one, that is spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl auto equal to update. So that's all about the database related properties. Now let's go to the next part, and next part is the create employee class. So we will create a employee class. So go to your Java folder, then go to Java class. Before creating the employee class, we need to create a package that contain our model or entity. So inside model we will create a employee class. So basically employee class, we will mark it with the annotation @entity, as we have to map this with the database table. And then we will create the fields. First field that we are creating is the ID, because every employee have ID, and it is our mark with this with annotation @ID, and then as it is our primary key, and then generated value basically this annotation is how we want to generate the value, and generation type will be identity. And then next is the name, every employee have name as well. Then email, then age, and then designation of employee. And then we will generate a getter setter for this. So for generating getter setter, we will generate a getter setter for all the fields. Okay, let's undo that and generate it. Let's undo that and generate it after our all the fields. So let's click on generate, then getter setter, and okay, now all the getter setter are generated successfully, and we will also generate true string for this method as well. Then click on generate, then click on toString, and it will generate a toString. So here we have created a employee class, and let's create a employee database as well, sorry, employee table as well. Use employee management system, and then create table employee ID as begin, then name as varchar 50, email as varchar 50, then age as int, and then designation as again varchar. So let's execute this, and our employee table created successfully. So let's test that. Select star from employee. So here you can see that our employee table created successfully, and currently since it have no data, so select star from employee return empty table. So this part is also complete. Let's move to the next step, and that is creating employee repository. So since we have to fetch the data from the database, so as per the MVC structure, it is mandatory that we have a repository for every class that needs to be interactive with the database. So let's create a repository package, and inside that employee repository, and let's inside that we will create a employee repository, employee repository, and mark this with as repository. Make sure it is as interface, and extends this with existing JPA repository so that we can use all the functionality of the JPA repository, and we have a class of employee type and long. So import this as here. And after creating the employee repository, next part is the creating the service. So let's create a package as service, then create a interface, that is employee service. So now question here is what all different method is there for fetching all the datas and performing all the CRUD operation related to the employee. So let's discuss what all method this employee service will contain. So basically this employee service interface contain these four methods. So first one is the get all employee, and this have a return type of list of employee because it is used to get all the data of all the employees. So next method contained by this interface is the save method. Basically this method is used to save new employee. And then there is a get by id and delete by id. So get by id is used to get the data, employee data based on the employee id, and then delete by id is used to delete the employee data based on the id. So let's move to the next part and adding all these method in the let's add all these method in the employee interface. So that is first one is the list of employee, and that is get all employee. So let's import the list, and then next is the void save, and basically this method is used to save the employee data in the database. And next is the get by id, and this method is used to fetch the employee data based on id. And it is long, taking id as parameter, then delete by id. And again it is taking as id as parameter. So let's add a class to implement this interface, that is employee service impl. So basically this class implements the employee interface and add logic for all the methods that we have added in the employee service. So let's click on implement method, and we need to implement all these method here. So first thing that we need to is to inject the employee repository here. So let's inject employee repository here, and employee repository, and after injecting the employee repository we can make use of all the functionalities that are present in the employee repository. So first one is the employee repository dot find all, because this method is basically used to get all the data that present in the employee table. Next is the saving. For saving we again will make use of existing method of JPA repository. So here we are also making use of existing method of JPA repository. So here we are not adding nothing advanced concept, just all the steps are very basic and simple. So let's add null check here, so that if we get null, so that case also got handled. And then get by id, then we will use again find by id method of JPA repository for this find by id and this. So make sure you will get the non-null id here. If id is null, then this method gives you exception object dot non-null id, then we will execute the code of this. So basically here we will make use of Java 8 optional class. So optional employee then employee repository dot find by id and id, and declare the employee as initially employee as null, and if optional employee dot is present, then only we will set the data to this optional employee dot get. Otherwise we will throw runtime exception, that is throw new runtime exception, that is employee not found with the id, and id we will print in the exception, and then whatever we get we will return that simply here. Okay, so we need to move out of this so that we can get it throughout the method. Okay, we copy it and paste it here. So this is the implementation for the get by id method. Now next is the implementation for the delete by id method. If objects dot non-null id, then we need to execute the employee repository dot delete by id and id. So basically this is the implementation for the delete by id method. So next is the controller level changes. So let's add up new package for controller, and then we will discuss what all API we need to expose here. So since we are done with the employee service and its implementation, now let's move to the controller. So next part is the create employee controller and expose API method to perform operation like get all employee data, save new employee, and delete the employee, etc. So basically our employee controller have these 5 methods. So basically the method that we are going to map with the default mapping is the used for viewing home page where we display the all employee data, and then next is the method with the request mapping add. We will add this with the mapping add. So this is used to open the page for adding new employee in the application. Then save, and this is used for the adding newly added employee in the database. Okay, so if you are confusing between /add and /save, then simply /add will open the UI form for saving the new employee, and /save will be called when user fill the adding new employee form on the UI and then click on save, then /save API will be called. Then update form will be used, this mapping will be used to show the update form, and upon clicking we again making use of employee, again making use of saving data, save method to save the employee, and then delete will be used to delete the existing employee. So let's create a controller class and add all these mappings. Employee controller, and mark this with @controller, and then add employee service, and now next part is the adding all the mappings and their methods. So first will be the default mapping, and let's add that get mapping with the mapping slash then public string view model, or we can simply show the view home page. So by clicking on the home page URL, you will be calling okay, so whenever user hits the base URL, then our application calls this method. So let's create a model and import this model, and then model dot add attribute, that is all employee list, and we will be using get all employee method for showing the data of the employee, and then return index. So by returning index means we are returning the index.html page from here. So next method is the add. Again, since slash add will be for used for showing the adding new employee form, so that's why it is get mapping. So let's add public string add new employee, and it is again taking model as input, and then employee. So since this method is used for creating the new entry for the employee, so we will be sending the empty employee object on the UI, and there when user fill all the detail and click on save, then this employee this employee have all the values, and we will be make use of this in the save method. Save, and next is the post mapping, that is used for saving the employee in the database. Public string save employee, and model attribute employee, and basically this employee have all the data that we are required for saving the employee in the database, and then employee service dot save. So basically here here we have null check, so no need to worry. So now open employee controller as well, and then return. So here we are, after adding the new employee in the database, again we are redirecting to the index.html page, that is we are returning from the default mapping. Now next is the get mapping, and basically for this we have a mapping of update form, and we are accepting ID in the path param. So again this method is used for returning the update form on the UI. So in path variable we are taking value as id, and since means we are taking the id in the path param, and basically based on this id we will send the employee object to the update form on UI. So basically employee service get by id, and then model dot add attribute employee and return update. So return update simply means we are returning the update.html page from here. And next is the again get mapping, then delete, and again we are taking the id in the request path variable here, public string delete by id, and again in the path variable we are taking id. So taking id in the path param, and then simply call the employee service dot delete by id and pass id to this method, and then simply return the home page, that is our index.html page. So these are the 4 methods that we require. So okay, since this is a delete mapping, since this method is used for deleting the employee from the database. Okay, maybe you have a question that we are deleting the employee from the database here, and then why we are marking this as a @get mapping. So we are marking this as @get mapping because we are returning the home page from here, so that's why we are marking it @get mapping. So now we are done with all the backend changes. Now next is the UI changes. So let's see what all UI changes we will make next. So in UI layer changes, basically we will create 3 main files. First one is the index.html, that is the file that we are returning from the default mapping. So this is the home page of our application, and we will show the all employee data in this table. And then next is the add employee.html. So basically this is the page for adding new employee, and then update html. So this is the page for updating the existing employee information. So let's proceed further and create a index.html page. So let's go to the source main resources, and then templates, and then add home page file, that is index.html, and inside index.html let's add the static content of our web page, and then for body we will add code and static content we have directly pasted. Okay, so here you can see that this is basically our home page, and containing the button containing the add employee action, and on add employee we are returning from the add new. So basically our mapping is /add new. I have added by mistake. So let's add code in the body. So in the body we have table row, and on table row we will execute for loop on employee, that is all employee list. So basically this all employee list is the list object that we are returning from the controller, and that is this one, all employee list. So copy this and go to the index.html and paste it here. So after pasting it, we will be adding data to the table columns. First one is the employee name, employee dot name. So basically we will copy this and paste this for other columns and make changes in this. Second one is the email, third one is the age, and fourth one is the designation. So that's all. And next is the for the action. So for action we will add a mappings, that is for first one is for update, that is update form, and we will pass id this to this, and for id we will be adding id like this, employee id, and then in this way. And here we simply add update, and for a better UI we will add bootstrap class to this. So if you have a question how this bootstrap class will work, then you can see that we have added a bootstrap we have included the bootstrap here. So similarly we will add a for the column this one is the for the update, and this one for the delete. So in this we simply add delete, then id, then employee.id, and here we will mark this as delete. So we will save it. So this is for the deleting the employee. So till now you may have question that we are writing the code continuously and will it work. So let's try it by running the application. Okay, so it is building our application, and okay, here we are getting exception that access is denied for the user root @localhost using password yes. Okay, unable to open a JDBC connection for DDL. So we are giving the exception, getting the exception here, and let's see our application.properties why we are getting this issue. Okay, so basically our database password is root, not simply root. So let's try to execute this again by entering the correct password. Okay, now you can see that after adding the correct password, our application up successfully. So let's go to the browser and try to hit the base URL. Okay, so you can clearly see that the home page of our application, that is index.html, opened successfully. Since we don't have any data in the employee database, so that's why it is showing empty now. So let's go to the development phase again and stop server for now and add a code for add the code for adding the employee in the database. So basically from here we are returning employee page. So actually it should be add employee. So because we have to add a page with the same name on UI, so click on add employee and copy this and then create a new page with the mapping add employee.html. so and from here we will add a code for the adding the employee in the database. So again we will copy the static part directly that we have handy, because for saving your time we are copying this from the existing source that we have. Okay, again it is not okay. Now we will check. Okay, so save employee and then we will create a form, because some of the code we directly copy pasted from our existing source, because here we have, because it is a static part and not contain any logic, so that's why we copy paste it. And then we will add href tag for submitting and then adding a class button info width as column 2 and then name as save. So basically this button, okay, by mistake I have added it as an anchor tag, but it should be button. So this button is for basically saving the employees. So copy this, cut and enter it in your form. So basically we have 4 fields in our employee class. So we will add input type text and th field. So basically th field is that we are is the Thymeleaf content, so we are using it from directly. Placeholder name and class form control 4 and column 4. So we will copy it for others fill directly. So it is for email, this one is used for age, this one used for designation, and email, age, and this one is placeholder is for the designation. And in the form on action we mentioned that it will go to our backend, and in action we will tell it to call our save backend API method that is marked with the save mapping. Then th object that will be keeping this all this data is the employee, and then at last we will add a anchor tag with mapping of home page. And basically we are adding an enter tag here that contain default mapping and show the index.html page that contains the all employee list. So save it and now try to up the server again. So our server up again successfully, and now go to the browser again and refresh the page with default mapping, and then click on add employee. So you can see that add employee mapping successfully called, and open the add employee page. So let's add one employee, robert.codesup@gmail.com, and age will be 25 and designation as software engineer 1, and click on save. Okay, so request method get not supported. So upon hitting it we are getting 405. So why we are getting 405? Because we haven't mentioned the method type in the our code. So let's add the method type here so that it will call our backend successfully. So stop and rerun our server again and try by adding data again. So now again clicking on save, again it is giving 405. So let's refresh this page and try to hit the again. Okay, again it is giving database return no negatively generate identity value. The database, okay, so something wrong with the backend. So let's check this, what is going wrong with the database return no natively generated identity value. Okay, so let's go to the database and try to check what happened there. First we will observe the log. Okay, I think we haven't mentioned the ID as a primary key, and due to this issue occurring. So let's drop table employee and then try to execute it again, and then check it again, describe employee, and now it is primary key. Okay, and now trying to hitting the page again by adding the values. Let's see it will open all the value or not. Okay, again could not execute statement exception occurs. So let's see why it is occurring again. Now field ID does not have a default value. Okay, so again we are facing this issue because it don't has default value, so default will be null. So again we will be dropping the table and creating it again, involve default value ID. Okay, now let's execute. It is executed successfully, and go to the browser again and try to save the values. Okay, again we are getting the same exception. Let's see what's wrong with the now with the default, and the field ID does not have a default value. Okay, so again it is giving field ID does not have a default value. So let's check our table. So let's drop the employee table again and try to execute this. Okay, so now let's check, describe it, auto incremented, and now it has a. So now let's go to the UI again and try to enter the data. So now you can clearly see that we have successfully created one entry in our employee table. Now let's add one more, tom.abc@hotmail.com, and age 28, designation software engineer 2, and we will add one more entry, that is Kim. Okay, as a Mitchell dot coursup@hotmail.com, then age 25, designation as software engineer 2. So again this entry will be solved. Okay, delete button should not be in blue, it is a delete operation, so it should be in red. So okay, we will change this in the index.html page, button to danger. Okay, it is not getting reflecting. Okay, so I think we need to update resources, stop and rerun. Okay, I think after starting the server again it will take ATS, and turn off the debugger and click on press on F8. Okay, so we will stop it and click on running the server again, and then go to the application, and then we will check the home page of our application. So now delete button in the Right, so let's implement the functionality for update button as well. Go to our ID. Okay, before that we will check our employee database, and here we can clearly see that now it contains 3 employee data. So now next goes to the next part is the implementing the functionality for the update button. Now go to the new file and add a new file, update.html. So in the update.html, basically we will add a form, and that form keep the user data and update that data in the database. So basically this is our code of employee table for updating the employee data in the database. So let's rerun our project again and check whether update functionality is working fine or not. So refreshing the page and click on update. Okay, again we are facing issue because something wrong we have written in the add employee table, sorry, not add employee form. So open your add employee form and okay, not add employee form but index.html page. So in the index.html page we have update form and then id, and then id equal to employee.id. So I think everything is correct here, nothing seems to be wrong, but we need to check why this is showing like this. So go to the browser, and then if we see localhost at the rate, okay, it is not resolving this part. So this is, I think, issue update form, and then employee.id. okay, so this is the issue, and id equal to employee.id. But if we directly trying to hit like this, update form /3, then it will open the page of updating the employee data, but we need to figure out why it is not showing it here. So yeah, problem is identified. The issue is we are using normal href tag, not a Thymeleaf tag. So now let's trying to make it is as earlier and try to hit, and then we stop and rerun it again, and then we will check. Now go to the, so now open the browser again and hit the base URL, and on base URL click on update, and suppose we are modifying the age and saving it. So now you can see that the age of Michael is 24. Now again we are adding one more employee with name Kevin and email kevin.tester@yahoo.com, and then age as 30 and designation as QA engineer, and then click on save, and now click on delete because we need to test our delete functionality as well. So click on delete, will delete the employee, and then we can click on adding the employee again so that we can check it again, our add functionality again. mention dot codesup@eofmail.com is as 25 software engineer 1. So it is again, and then we are modifying the email and then checking the email as n, and then we are deleting the Tom as a, and this is deleted successfully. So now if we see, there are only 3 records in that table. So if we check our database, then it should contain 3 record only, and here there are 3 records only. So yeah, that's all for this tutorial. Hope you guys like the tutorial and able to understand the things. Please do subscribe to our channel so that you cannot miss any further technology tutorials from our side. Thanks for watching, guys.